The stadium erupts in chaos. Magic barriers shatter like glass, fragments of crystallized mana raining down like deadly snowflakes. Professors scramble to reinforce the protective wards, their faces pale with terror as they pour everything they have into shields that simply cannot hold. Students flee from the lower sections, trampling each other in their desperation to escape. And in the center of it all stands a young man, shadows coiling around his body like living serpents, his eyes burning with an otherworldly crimson light that reflects off the panicked faces of everyone watching. The same boy they mocked 3 months ago, the same pathetic failure they spat on in the cafeteria, the same nobody they left bleeding in the dirt outside the training halls after another session of what they called character building, the same worthless charity case whose name they used as an insult. But something has changed, something fundamental, something terrifying. The headmaster's voice trembles for the first time in 50 years. His ancient hands shake as he grips the railing of his observation booth. What? What have you become? The young man tilts his head, an unsettling gesture that seems almost serpentine. A smile creeps across his face, slow and deliberate, promising consequences for sins long forgotten by those who committed them. In his left hand, barely visible through the swirling darkness, is a small doll made of twisted black threads and ancient bone. It pulses with his heartbeat, alive with power that shouldn't exist in this world, power that the most learned scholars would swear was impossible. Become? He whispers. And somehow the word carries across the entire arena, despite the screaming and the chaos and the crumbling barriers. No, I was always this. You just never cared to look. None of you ever looked at me and saw anything worth acknowledging, so you never noticed when I stopped being your victim and started becoming your nightmare. 3 months earlier, Kale Ashford was nothing. Less than nothing. He was the Academy's favorite punching bag, a cautionary tale parents told their children about what happens when you're born without talent. His manacle was classified as hollow grade, the lowest possible ranking. It meant he could sense magic, but never truly wield it. Like being able to smell food, but never taste it. Like watching everyone else run while you're chained to the ground. The Arcanum Royal Academy was supposed to be the greatest magical institution on the continent. A sprawling campus that covered an entire mountain plateau with buildings that defied architectural logic, supported by ancient enchantments rather than mere stone and mortar. 12,000 students from every noble house and powerful family gathered within its walls each year, representing the cream of magical talent from across the kingdom and beyond. The main campus consisted of 12 towers, each devoted to a different school of magic. The Tower of Flames, where fire mages trained to control the most destructive element. The Tower of Tides, where water mages learned to heal and to drown with equal facility. The Tower of Winds, where air mages practiced flying and cutting. And so on through every elemental and conceptual magical discipline humanity had discovered over millennia of study. Sprawling Gothic architecture connected these towers, buildings that seemed to grow organically from the mountain itself. Bridges of crystallized mana arched between structures. Gardens flourished in impossible locations, sustained by life magic that kept exotic plants from every climate thriving side by side. Waterfalls flowed upward in some courtyards, the water enchanted to defy gravity as a demonstration of the Academy's mastery over natural law. Training grounds dotted the campus, some open to the sky for aerial combat practice, others buried deep underground for dangerous experimentation. Arenas of various sizes hosted everything from first-year sparring matches to championship tournaments that drew spectators from across the realm. Libraries containing knowledge accumulated over 8 centuries of magical history occupied entire buildings, their shelves extending into pocket dimensions to hold more books than any physical space could accommodate. Forbidden sections were sealed behind wards that would incinerate unauthorized intruders. Some tomes were supposedly sentient, able to share or withhold their knowledge based on the worthiness of the reader, and Kale was there by mistake. His father had been a decorated war mage who died protecting the kingdom's borders from incursion by the Darklands. His mother perished in the same battle, fighting alongside her husband against odds that no one had expected them to survive. They hadn't survived, of course, but they'd bought time for reinforcements to arrive, for the breach to be sealed, for thousands of civilians to escape what would have been a massacre. Heroes. True heroes. The kind whose portraits hung in the Hall of Valor, whose names were spoken with reverence, whose sacrifice was commemorated every year on the anniversary of the Battle of Red Dawn. As an orphan of heroes, the Crown granted Kale admission through a special program, a charity case, a token gesture to honor the dead and demonstrate the kingdom's gratitude. He received tuition, room, and board, all paid for by a fund established in his parents' memory. What he didn't receive was respect, or talent, or any of the things that actually mattered within these walls. The other students never let him forget it. That morning started like every other. Kale woke before dawn in the cramped dormitory room he'd been assigned in the oldest, most dilapidated building on campus. The room was barely larger than a closet, with a single window that faced a brick wall. While other students enjoyed suites with enchanted temperature control and self cleaning spells, Kale's blanket was patched with holes and his mattress sagged in the middle. He dressed in his uniform, which was several sizes too large because no one had bothered to tailor it for him. The academy crest on his chest was faded from washing. His shoes had a hole in the left sole that he'd stuffed with paper. Today was the quarterly evaluation. Every student had to demonstrate their progress in the arena. It was supposed to be a chance to advance in rankings, to prove your worth, to catch the eye of powerful mentors who could sponsor your career. For most students, it was an exciting opportunity. For Kale, it was scheduled public humiliation. He made his way to the dining hall, taking the back routes to avoid the crowds. The hallways of the academy were magnificent, with towering pillars carved with magical runes that shifted colors depending on the time of day. Paintings of legendary mages seemed to follow you with their eyes. Crystal chandeliers floated without support, their light adjusting automatically to the needs of passers-by. None of it was meant for someone like him. The dining hall was already packed when he arrived. Long tables stretched the length of the massive room, laden with enchanted dishes that never ran empty. Students sat according to their grade ranking. The high rankers occupied the raised platform near the windows, where the best views and most comfortable seating awaited. The mid rankers filled the center, and the low rankers were crammed near the kitchen doors, where the noise and heat were worst. Kale didn't even qualify for the low ranker section. He grabbed a small roll of bread from the corner of a serving plate and tried to slip out unnoticed. He almost made it, well, if it isn't the charity case. The voice belonged to Marcus Thornwell, heir to the Thornwell Trading Company and one of the Academy's golden children. His manicore was rated prismatic, the second highest classification. His family had donated enough money to have an entire building named after them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly styled dark hair and eyes that gleamed with casual cruelty. Behind him stood his usual entourage: Victor Crane, whose ice magic could freeze an entire lake; Celine Blackwood, whose family specialized in curse arts; and at least a dozen other students who had nothing better to do than watch Marcus torment whoever caught his attention. "I heard you're participating in the evaluation today," Marcus continued, approaching with lazy confidence. "That should be entertaining. What are you going to do, throw your bread at the practice dummy?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some students pretended not to watch while stealing glances. Others openly grinned, enjoying the show. Kale kept his head down. "I'm just required to participate. Everyone is." "Required," Marcus repeated mockingly. "You know what I think? I think they should exempt you. It's embarrassing for the academy to have someone like you in the same arena as actual mages. You make us all look bad by association." He reached out and flicked the bread from Kale's hand. It bounced across the stone floor and rolled under a table. "Boops." Marcus didn't bother to fake an apologetic expression. "Butterfingers." Kale's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Marcus and his friends wanted a reaction. They fed on it like parasites. Nothing to say? Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Kale could hear. "That's what I thought. You know what you are. You're proof that talent is everything. Your parents might have been heroes, but you're just genetic waste. A disappointment to their memory." Something cracked inside Kale. A fracture in the carefully maintained wall he'd built around his emotions, but he swallowed it down, like he always did. "I have to prepare for the evaluation," he said quietly. "Oh, please do." Marcus stepped aside with an exaggerated bow. "I can't wait to watch." Kale walked away, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on his back. Whispers followed him like a shadow. He kept walking, out of the dining hall, through the corridors, past the training grounds where students were already warming up with impressive displays of elemental magic. He didn't stop until he reached the old supply shed behind the equipment storage building. It was the closest thing he had to a sanctuary, a place where no one bothered to look for him because no one cared enough to look. He sat on a dusty crate and stared at his hands. Worthless hands. Hands that had never cast a spell, never channeled mana into anything useful, never done anything except get him beaten and mocked. Why did you have to die? He whispered to parents he could barely remember. Why did you leave me in this hell? No answer came, it never did. The evaluation arena was a massive coliseum capable of holding the entire student body and then some. Enchanted observation crystals floated above the central stage, projecting images for those seated too far to see clearly. The arena floor could be reconfigured to create different environments, from simple flat surfaces to elaborate obstacle courses to simulated battle zones. Today, it was set to standard evaluation mode. A series of targeting dummies stood at various distances. Magical sensors embedded in the floor would measure everything from mana output to precision to creativity. The scores would be displayed in real time for everyone to see. Kale sat in the waiting area with the other low rankers, though even they maintained their distance from him. He was radioactive. Association with him meant social death. The evaluations proceeded in order of ranking, starting from the bottom. This meant Kale was first. Kale Ashford, announced the officiating professor, a stern woman named Professor Moira. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. Step forward. The walk to the center of the arena felt like walking to his execution. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some students pulled out snacks, treating this like entertainment. Marcus and his friends had secured front row seats on the elevated platform. You have 3 minutes, Professor Moira stated. Demonstrate your capabilities against the training dummies. Scoring will be based on damage output, technique, and mana efficiency. Begin when ready. Kale faced the dummies. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear himself think. He knew what was about to happen. He knew there was no way to avoid the humiliation. But maybe this time would be different. Maybe if he tried hard enough, concentrated enough, wanted it badly enough. He raised his hands and attempted to channel mana through his core. He could feel it there, that tiny spark of magical energy that everyone possessed. But when he tried to shape it, to push it outward, it simply dispersed, like trying to hold water in a colander. Nothing happened. He tried again, straining with every fiber of his being. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His arms trembled. The seconds ticked by. Still nothing. Laughter began to spread through the audience. First scattered giggles, then growing into full-throated mockery. Someone started a slow clap. Others joined in. "Come on, Charity Case," someone shouted. "Show us your amazing skills. Maybe if he stares at it harder, it'll fall over. I've seen house cats with more magical ability." Kale's concentration shattered. He dropped his arms, shame burning through him like acid. The scoring display above the arena showed a perfect 0, the lowest possible result. Professor Moira didn't even bother commenting. Next participant. As Kale walked back toward the waiting area, someone stuck out a foot. He tripped, sprawling across the stone floor. The arena exploded with laughter. "Careful," the student who tripped him called out. "Wouldn't want to hurt yourself before your next non-performance." Kale pushed himself up, keeping his head down. His palms were scraped, blood welled from a cut on his knee. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the suffocating humiliation. He didn't return to the waiting area. He kept walking, out of the arena, away from the noise and the cruelty, not caring if anyone noticed or cared. He just needed to get away. The Ashwood Forest bordered the academy's eastern edge. It was technically off limits to students, but the prohibition was rarely enforced for the outer perimeter. Only the deeper regions, where dangerous magical creatures lurked, were truly restricted. Kale didn't care about rules anymore. He crashed through the underbrush, branches scratching his face and tearing at his already shabby uniform. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs threatened to give out, until the sounds of the academy faded into silence. Finally, he collapsed against an ancient oak tree, sliding down to sit among the gnarled roots. His breath came in ragged gasps. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the blood from his scraped palms. "Why?" he screamed at the canopy above. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" The forest offered no answers. Birds continued their songs, leaves rustled, in the gentle breeze. The world was utterly indifferent to his suffering. Kale sat there for hours as the light gradually faded. He didn't move when evening arrived, when the shadows deepened, when the temperature dropped. He didn't care. Part of him hoped something from the deeper forest would find him. At least that would be a meaningful end. It was nearly dark when he noticed the glow. At first, he thought it was moonlight filtering through the leaves, some trick of the evening light creating patterns in the darkness. But the quality was wrong. Too purple, too concentrated, too deliberate. And it was coming from somewhere ahead, deeper in the forest, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Against all logical judgment, curiosity stirred within him. A voice in his head, the voice of reason, screamed that he should turn back, that nothing good came from following mysterious lights in forbidden forests, that this was how people died in all the stories he'd read as a child. But what did he have to lose? If something killed him, at least his suffering would end. At least the daily humiliation would stop. At least he wouldn't have to wake up tomorrow dreading another day of being treated like garbage. And if it was something harmless, at least it was more interesting than sitting in the dark, waiting for nothing, waiting for a life that would never improve. He followed the light, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. The trees grew older and more twisted as he walked, their bark darker, their branches reaching like grasping fingers. The underbrush thickened, then abruptly cleared into a small glade he was certain hadn't existed before. The air itself felt different here, heavier, charged with potential energy. In the center stood a stone pedestal, ancient and weathered, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe when he looked at them directly. And on the pedestal sat a doll. It was roughly the size of his palm, crafted from materials he couldn't identify, despite years of studying magical components in classes where no one bothered to teach him properly. Dark threads that seemed to absorb the moonlight formed its body, each strand pulsing with inner energy. Bone fragments, too small and too perfectly shaped to come from any animal he knew, created its joints with an artistry that suggested intentional design rather than random assembly. Its face was blank, except for two small holes where eyes might be, holes that somehow seemed to be watching him. The purple glow emanated from within it, pulsing like a heartbeat. Like his heartbeat, he realized with a start, the rhythm was perfectly synchronized with the blood pumping through his veins. Kale approached cautiously, every instinct he possessed, screaming warnings. Every lesson he'd ever learned about magical artifacts and bound entities flashed through his mind. Nothing good could come from this. Nothing good ever came from mysterious objects in forbidden places. This was textbook dangerous. But those instincts had served him so well in life, hadn't they? They'd kept him alive to suffer more, to be mocked more, to experience endless degradation. They taught him to keep his head down and accept his fate. And look where that had gotten him. He reached for the doll. The moment his fingers touched it, the world shattered. Kale found himself floating in an infinite void. Stars wheeled around him, galaxies spinning in impossible patterns. He had no body, no form, just consciousness adrift in cosmic emptiness. A voice spoke, neither male nor female, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Another broken soul seeking power. How delectable. What is this? Kale's thoughts formed into words without his lips. Where am I, you are between? In the space where desperate wishes take form. And I am the answer to prayers that should never be spoken. The voice grew closer, as if something vast was studying him from all angles. Your pain is exquisite, deep, layered, aged like fine wine. You have suffered, little mage, suffered beautifully. I'm not a mage. I can't use magic. Cannot, or have not been permitted to. The voice laughed, and stars flickered with the sound. Your potential was locked away before you even knew it existed. A curse placed upon your bloodline generations ago. Your parents' deaths were not coincidence, and their failure to break your chains before dying was orchestrated. Kale's consciousness reeled. What are you saying? I am saying that your suffering was designed, manufactured. You were meant to be empty, to be a vessel. But they failed to account for one thing. The voice grew cold with satisfaction. They failed to account for me. Who are you? I am Vestris, once a god of vengeance, now bound into this form by those who feared my power. I have waited 3,000 years for someone with the right pain, the right emptiness, the right burning need for retribution. The void seemed to contract, focusing on him. I have waited for you. What do you want? Want? I want to help you, child. I want to give you everything they tried to take away. Power beyond comprehension. Abilities that will make your enemies weep and beg. Revenge against every soul who ever wronged you. Vestris paused. All I ask in return is a simple partnership. You carry me. You use me. And in doing so, you feed my essence with the despair of your enemies. Knowledge. Kale should have refused. He should have sensed the trap, the corruption, the darkness inherent in such an offer. But he remembered the laughter, the bread knocked from his hands, the foot that tripped him. Years of torment condensed into a singular, burning coal in his chest. What would I become? Exactly what you always should have been. What they feared you would be. A conduit of power so vast that the very academy that mocked you will tremble at your shadow. Kale thought of his parents. Heroes who had died for a kingdom that abandoned their son. He thought of every cruel word, every physical blow, every time he'd swallowed his pride just to survive another day. Show me, he said. The void exploded into light. Kale gasped back to consciousness, sprawled in the glade with the doll clutched in his hand. But everything was different. The world had transformed, or perhaps he had finally been given eyes to see it as it truly was. He could feel energy pulsing through his veins, electric and alive, a current of power that had been denied to him for his entire existence. He could sense the magical currents in the air around him, streams of invisible force flowing through the forest like rivers of light. His mana core, that pathetic hollow thing that had defined his entire existence, now burned with black fire that felt paradoxically cool to his inner senses. A translucent screen appeared before his eyes, visible only to him, floating in his vision like something from the games he used to play before the academy crushed his spirit. Stage 1 of 7 current abilities unlocked. Shadow Step. Minor spatial displacement through Shadow's Hollow. Touch drain magical energy from contact curse vision. Perceive magical bonds and weaknesses advancement conditions. Absorb the despair of those who wronged you. What is this? Kale whispered aloud, his voice strange to his own ears, stronger somehow, more resonant. Vestris's voice echoed in his mind, intimate and amused, like a friend sharing secrets in the dark, a gift from my era. We gods used similar systems to track our followers' progress, to measure their devotion and growth. I have adapted it for our partnership. Consider it your guide to apotheosis, your map to becoming everything they said you could never be. Kale stared at his hands. They looked the same, calloused from years of menial tasks, scarred from accidents that weren't really accidents, but power thrummed beneath the skin, a potential that had always been there, locked away, denied. He focused on the nearest shadow, a dark pool beneath an oak tree, and willed himself to move toward it. His body dissolved into darkness and reformed next to the tree in an instant. A laugh escaped his lips, wild and incredulous and slightly unhinged. He just teleported. Him, the hollow-grade failure who couldn't light a candle with magic, who couldn't warm a cup of water or make a feather float or do any of the simple exercises that first-year students mastered in their first week. He'd actually teleported. He did it again, jumping from shadow to shadow across the glade, each displacement smoother than the last. The sensation was indescribable, like becoming water and flowing through invisible channels, like stepping between heartbeats, like existing everywhere and nowhere at once. This is only the beginning, Vestris promised, and Kale could hear the satisfaction in the voice, the hunger. Return to your academy. Play their game. Let them continue to underestimate you. But know that every step you take builds toward the reckoning they so richly deserve. Every moment of pretended weakness is an investment in future triumph. Kale looked toward where the academy lights glowed in the distance, that institution of torment he'd learned to hate with every fiber of his being. For the first time in years, he smiled. He had work to do. The next 3 weeks tested Kale's patience in ways he'd never imagined. Vestris insisted on secrecy. The element of surprise was essential. If he revealed his newfound abilities too early, his enemies would unite against him before he was strong enough to face them all. The Academy had demonstrated many times that it could destroy anyone who threatened the established order. He needed to be ready for that level of opposition, so he endured. He attended classes, suffered the mockery, pretended to be the same worthless failure everyone expected. He kept his head down when markers passed him in the hallways. He didn't react when someone spit in his lunch. He maintained the mask of beaten acceptance that he'd worn for years. But in the shadows, literally and figuratively, he trained. Every night, after the dormitories fell silent and the patrol majors completed their rounds, Kale would slip away to the forest. The glade where he'd found Vestris had become his sanctuary, protected by the entity's presence from any magical detection the Academy might employ. He practiced shadow step until he could traverse 100 meters in the blink of an eye, his body becoming so familiar with the dissolution and reformation that it felt as natural as walking. He learned to chain multiple steps together, appearing in one location only to vanish again before an observer could register his presence. He discovered that shadows weren't just pathways, but could be used to mask his presence entirely, making him invisible to normal sight. He experimented with hollow touch on the magical creatures of the forest, draining their energy to fuel his own growth. A pack of shadow wolves became his first significant prey, their dark essence compatible with his own abilities. Each hunt made him stronger, faster, more attuned to the flows of magical energy in the world around him. He learnt that different creatures provided different benefits. Shadow creatures enhanced his stealth. Elemental beasts, the few he could find, added versatility to his repertoire. He used curse vision to study the invisible bonds between mages and their magic, learning where they were strongest and where they could be severed. The academy itself became his laboratory. He would observe students in the training halls, watching the patterns of their mana circulation, noting the vulnerabilities in their techniques. He catalogued weaknesses in dozens of potential opponents, building a mental database of how to defeat each one most efficiently. The system tracked his progress with cold efficiency, each notification marking another step toward the power he craved. Bond status stage 1 of 7 despair, absorbed 0 required for stage 2, 100 units. What counts as despair? Kale asked during one training session, blood from a shadow wolf still steaming on his hands. Emotional suffering caused by your actions, Vestris explained, voice rich with anticipation. The greater the anguish, the more you gain. Humiliation provides moderate returns, the casual cruelties that wound pride and confidence. Fear offers more, especially the fear of the previously powerful discovering their impotence. True despair, the crushing of hope itself, that is the greatest prize. When someone realizes that everything they believed about themselves was a lie, when their entire worldview collapses under the weight of their helplessness, that despair is worth more than 100 petty humiliations. So I have to make people suffer. You have to make them feel what you have felt. Is that so terrible? Is it not justice for them to taste the poison they forced you to swallow? For years they have fed on your suffering, grown strong on your weakness. Now you will simply reverse the equation. Kale couldn't argue with that logic, wouldn't argue with it. The Academy had stripped him of sympathy, of mercy, of any inclination toward forgiveness. They had forged him into something cold, and now that coldness would be their undoing. His first real opportunity came on a Wednesday. Victor Crane, the ice mage from Marcus's entourage, had a habit of visiting the bathhouse near midnight. He considered it his private domain, having threatened enough lower-ranked students to ensure his solitude. Victor was the one who had filled Kale's room with ice during his first year, leaving him to nearly freeze to death until a janitor found him the next morning. Kale had never forgotten. Neither had his new partner. The bathhouse was empty when Kale arrived, concealed in shadows near the entrance. Victor came through the door precisely at midnight, wearing nothing but a towel and an expression of bored entitlement. Steam rose from the heated pools beyond. Victor didn't notice anything wrong until the torches started flickering. What the hell? He looked around, ice already crystallizing in his palm. Who's there? Kale stepped out of the shadows, allowing himself to be seen. Victor's initial fear transformed into contemptuous recognition. You? The charity case? Victor laughed. What are you doing here? This place is off limits to trash like you. I came to return a favor, Kale said quietly. Victor's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. What are you talking about? My first year, winter. You filled my room with ice. I almost died. Kale walked forward slowly, and the shadows seemed to walk with him. I screamed for help, but no one came. They found me the next morning with frostbite on 3 fingers. I couldn't feel my hands properly for months. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Victor's face. That was years ago. It was just a joke. It wasn't a joke to me. Kale raised his hand, and Victor instinctively launched a spike of ice toward him. Kale dissolved into shadow, the ice passing through empty air, and reformed behind Victor. His hand clamped onto Victor's shoulder before the ice mage could react. The effect was immediate. Victor's eyes went wide as he felt his magical energy draining away. The ice in his palm melted. The frost in the air dissipated. His core, which he had spent years cultivating, was being siphoned like water through a straw. "What are you doing?" Victor's voice cracked with genuine fear. "What the hell are you doing to me?" "Taking what's mine," Kale replied. He drained Victor until the ice mage collapsed to his knees, shaking and pale, barely conscious. The system notification appeared. Hollow touch successful, magical energy absorbed, 847 units temporary ability unlocked, ice manifestation 24 hours, despair plus helplessness, total despair 23 100ths. Victor looked up at Kale with haunted eyes. "How you're hollow grade? You can't I?" Kale crouched to meet Victor's gaze. "That's what everyone told me. I couldn't cast magic. I couldn't defend myself. I can be anything but a punching bag for people like you." He smiled, and Victor flinched. "They were wrong. And now you're going to tell everyone that I'm still the same pathetic failure they've always known. Because if you don't, if you breathe a word about what happened here tonight, I'll drain you until there's nothing left." Victor nodded frantically. Tears were forming in his eyes. "Good boy." Kale patted his cheek condescendingly. "Go get some sleep. You look tired." He melted back into the shadows, leaving Victor alone and trembling in the steam. The weeks continued. Kale hunted his prey carefully, selecting targets from among those who had wronged him most egregiously. He was systematic, patient, like a spider spinning an elaborate web. Selene Blackwood, who had cursed his food to cause painful stomach cramps for a month, found herself afflicted by nightmares so horrifying she stopped sleeping. Kale used her family's own curse techniques against her, thanks to the knowledge he'd absorbed through curse vision. Despair absorbed 31 units, prolonged psychological torment total, 54 100ths. A group of third years who had broken his arm during his second year discovered that their private spell vault had been breached. Their precious collections of forbidden magic, accumulated through years of black market dealings, vanished into shadow. They turned on each other, accusations flying, friendships shattering. Despair absorbed 28 units. Betrayal plus loss, total 82. 100ths, a professor who had deliberately failed Kale despite correct answers, found his reputation crumbling when accidentally leaked documents revealed his acceptance of bribes from noble families. He was dismissed in disgrace. Despair absorbed 19 units. Professional destruction, total 101 100ths. The system pulsed with satisfaction. Stage 2 advancement triggered bond deepening in progress. New abilities unlocking. Shadow manifestation, create solid constructors. From darkness fear aura, passive intimidation effect curse binding. Place debilitating marks on targets. You have done well, Vestris praised. Your enemies scatter like startled birds. They do not even realize they are all being hunted by the same predator. Marcus hasn't suffered yet, Kale noted. He's been away on family business, and when he returns, Kale's smile was cold. The tournament begins next week. He'll be back for that. Ah, the quarterly combat tournament. A perfect stage for your ascension. I'm thinking something more memorable. The Arcanum Combat Tournament was the Academy's premier event, held 4 times per year at the beginning of each season. Students fought in bracketed matches to determine rankings, with the winners earning scholarships, mentorships, and bragging rights that lasted until the next tournament. Participation was mandatory for all students except those with medical exemptions. Even hollow-grade failures like Kale were required to enter, though they were typically eliminated in the first round against significantly stronger opponents. This time would be different. Registration took place in the Grand Hall, with students lining up to submit their names and receive their preliminary bracket assignments. The hall buzzed with excited chatter, predictions about likely winners, analysis of fighting styles. Kale waited in line, hood drawn low to avoid attention. Not that anyone paid him attention anymore. His recent absences from public humiliation sessions had made him fade from their collective consciousness. When he reached the registration table, the attending professor barely glanced at him before stamping his entry form. Ashford Cale, hollow grade. The professor's voice dripped with boredom. Bracket 7, preliminary match against. He checked the bracket. Leon Castellan. Cale's heart skipped. Leon Castellan was a fourth-year senior ranked in the top 20. His specialty was enhancement magic, able to amplify his physical abilities to superhuman levels. He was one of Marcus's close associates, known for breaking bones during friendly sparring matches. Is there a problem? The professor asked, finally looking up. No problem, Cale replied. Just confirming. He walked away, fighting the smile that threatened to spread across his face. Vestris chuckled in his mind. A challenging opponent for your debut. How theatrical. I couldn't have planned it better myself. The tournament began 3 days later, under clear skies and the expectant gazes of thousands. The main arena had been reconfigured into multiple combat zones, allowing simultaneous matches for efficiency. The early rounds, where the low rankers were cold, took place in the smaller secondary zones. Only as the tournament progressed would matches move to the central stage. Cale's match with Leon was scheduled for the third time slot. He spent the first two watching, observing the fighting styles of students he'd never bothered to study before. Knowledge was power, after all. Vestris approved of his thoroughness. When his name was called, Cale made his way to Combat Zone 7. Leon was already waiting, arms crossed, expression smug. A crowd had gathered to watch, larger than usual for a preliminary match. Word had spread that the hollow-grade failure was fighting a top 20 senior. They'd come to see a massacre. Ashford, Leon greeted him. I almost felt bad when I saw the bracket. Almost. But then I remembered you were the one who made Victor cry last month. Cale kept his expression blank. Victor talks too much. He didn't talk at all, actually. He's been weird ever since. Some of us think you did something to him. Leon's smile hardened. So consider this match a message from Marcus. Whatever you're planning, stop it, or we'll stop you. I appreciate the warning, Cale said mildly. The officiating professor stepped between them. This is a combat evaluation. Standard rules apply. First to incapacitate or force a yield wins. Lethal techniques are prohibited. Medical majors are standing by. She looked between them. On my signal, begin. Leon moved instantly, his body blurring with enhancement magic as he closed the distance. His fist, wrapped in glowing energy, streaked toward Cale's face with enough force to shatter stone. Cale dissolved into shadow. Leon's punch passed through empty air. He stumbled, off balance, and Cale reformed behind him. A hand touched Leon's back. The drain began. Leon's enhancement flickered and died. His magical reserves, carefully cultivated over 4 years, began flowing into Cale like water into a siphon. The senior's eyes went wide with shock. "The hell are you doing?" Leon spun, trying to grab Cale, but his movements were already sluggish. Hollow touch was merciless. "Fighting," Cale replied. He ducked under Leon's clumsy swing and touched him again, draining more. "Isn't that what we're here for?" Leon's face contorted with rage and fear. He tried to channel more enhancement magic, but there was nothing left to channel. His core felt empty, violated. He threw a mundane punch, and Cale caught his fist easily. "You're strong," Cale admitted. "Or you were. But without your magic, you're just a bigger-than-average student, throwing sloppy punches." He twisted Leon's arm, forcing the senior to his knees. "I believe this is the part where you yield." The crowd was silent. Absolutely silent. The match had lasted maybe 30 seconds. Leon's face was red with humiliation. "I yield," he spat. "Louder, please. Some people in the back might not have heard." "I yield," Leon shouted. Cale released him and stepped back. The officiating professor looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Despair absorbed 41 units, public humiliation plus violation, total despair 142, 250ths for stage 3. Winner, Kyle Ashford, the professor finally announced. Her voice sounded distant, confused. Advancing to round 2. Cale walked away from the combat zone without looking back. Behind him, the crowd erupted into frantic whispers. The hollow-grade failure had just destroyed a top 20 senior. That was impossible. That defied everything they understood about magical rankings. But they'd all seen it happen. Word spread through the tournament like wildfire. By the time Kale's second round match arrived, the secondary zone was packed to capacity. Students who had no business watching preliminary rounds were squeezing in for a glimpse. His opponent was a third year named Diana Wells, specializing in barrier magic. She directed a powerful shield before the match even began, clearly having heard what happened to Leon. I don't know what trick you used, Diana called from behind her barrier, but it won't work on me. You can't touch what you can't reach. Kale tilted his head. Who said I need to touch you? He raised his hand, and shadows coalesced into solid form. A spear of crystallized darkness materialized in his grip. Diana's eyes went wide. That's manifestation magic. You're hollow grade, so I've been told. Kale hurled the shadow spear. It punched through Diana's barrier like paper. She barely dodged, the spear grazing her shoulder and drawing a line of blood. Before she could recover, Kale was there, having closed the distance through shadow in an instant. His hand touched her barrier directly, and it began to decay. The golden light flickered, dimmed, and died. Diana was exposed. Yield, Kale suggested. Diana's barrier was gone. Her confidence was gone. She was trembling, face pale, confronting something her worldview couldn't accommodate. I yield, she whispered. Despair absorbed. 27 units total, 169 250ths. The tournament continued. Kale advanced through the rounds like a force of nature, implacable and unstoppable. His opponents varied in specialty and strength, but none could stand against a power that fed on their own fear. Each match was shorter than the last as word of his capabilities spread. Some opponents yielded before the fight even began, unwilling to experience what had befallen their predecessors. His third round opponent was a fire mage named Marcus Chen, no relation to the Thornwell family, but equally arrogant. Marcus had been one of the students who regularly threw burning embers at Kale in the hallways. Just hot enough to sting, never hot enough to leave marks that teachers might investigate. You might have beaten Diana, Marcus said as they squared off, flames dancing around his fists. But fire is different from barriers. Fire is alive. Fire is hungry. You can't just break fire. Distinct. Neither can you break shadow, Kale replied. Marcus attacked with a wave of flame that should have incinerated everything in its path. Kale stepped through it using Shadow's Step, the darkness within him consuming the light and heat in the instant between departure and arrival. He emerged behind Marcus with his hand already reaching for the fire mage's shoulder. The drain was brutal. Fire magic was energetic, volatile, difficult to contain, but Vestris had been teaching Kale how to become a void, how to become an emptiness that consumed all energy equally. Marcus's flames sputtered and died. His internal heat faded. By the time Kale released him, the fire mage was shivering despite the warm afternoon. Despair absorbed 34 units, elemental violation plus helplessness, total 152 50ths. His fourth round opponent was a wind mage who tried to stay at distance, pelting Kale with cutting gusts and miniature tornadoes. Kale responded by using Shadow Manifestation to create anchors that kept him grounded, then Shadow Step to close the distance whenever the wind mage paused to breathe. 3 touches, 3 drains, another yield, despair absorbed, 29 units total, 144 250ths. By the time the quarterfinals arrived, Kale Ashford was no longer a footnote. He was the story of the tournament. The zero who became something, one student whispered to another as Kale passed. I heard he made a deal with the demon, another murmured. Does it matter how? Did you see what he did to Marcus's friends? Ah, yes, Marcus's friends. Victor still flinched at shadows. Psst. Leon had withdrawn from the tournament, claiming his core needed recovery. Selene hadn't been seen in public for days. And Marcus himself had finally returned. Kale found him in the competitor waiting area before the quarterfinal matches. Marcus was surrounded by his remaining entourage, face set in a cold mask that didn't quite hide his unease. Their eyes met across the room. Ashford. Marcus's voice was steady, but Kale could hear the strain beneath it. Making quite the splash, aren't you? Just participating as required, Kale replied. Everyone is, after all. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't know what game you're playing, but this ends today. If you face me in the tournament, I will put you down so hard you'll never get up again. Kale smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I look forward to it. The quarterfinal bracket was revealed. Kale's opponent was a girl named Iris Moran, ranked 8th overall and known for her light magic. Brilliant, versatile, and extremely dangerous. Marcus's opponent was a boy named Derek Stone, ranked 15th. Heavy earth magic, slow but devastating. If both of them won their matches, they would face each other in the semi-finals. The stage was being set. Iris Moran took Kale more seriously than any previous opponent. She'd spent the entire morning watching recordings of his earlier matches, analyzing his shadow-based abilities, developing counters. Light dispels shadow, she said, as they faced each other in the central arena. The main stage had finally been opened for the quarterfinals, and thousands watched from the stands. It's basic, elemental interaction. Whatever trick you used against those other students won't work on me. She was right, in a sense. Her light magic posed a genuine threat to his shadow abilities. Direct confrontation would be difficult. Good thing Kale had other options. Let's find out, he said. The match began, and Iris immediately flooded the arena with brilliant light. Every shadow vanished, eliminated by the sustained luminescence. She'd essentially turned the entire combat zone into her domain. No shadows to hide in now, she called. Confidence rising. You're just a hollow-grade failure again. Kale closed his eyes. Fair aura, he whispered. The technique didn't rely on shadows. It emanated from his very presence, pressing against the minds of everyone nearby. The audience felt it first, an inexplicable dread creeping up their spines. The more sensitive among them shivered. Iris felt it like a punch to the gut. Her light flickered. Just for an instant, her concentration wavering under the psychological pressure. But an instant was all Kale needed. He crossed the arena in that moment of weakness, moving faster than eyes could track, and his hand clamped onto her face. The drain was vicious this time. He wasn't just taking her energy, he was taking her light itself, pulling the magical brightness into his own void. Iris screamed as her brilliant illumination dimmed, faded, died. The arena plunged into shadow. Your mistake, Kale said softly, his face inches from hers, was assuming I only had one trick. He released her, and she crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The light magic that had defined her abilities was gone, consumed. It would return eventually, but not today, maybe not for weeks. Despair absorbed 38 units, pride destruction plus identity crisis, total 207, 250ths. The crowd was stunned into silence. Then, somewhere in the stands, someone began to clap. Others joined. Not celebration, exactly. More like reluctant acknowledgement of witnessing something extraordinary. Kale turned toward where Marcus sat in the competitor box. Their eyes met again. See you in the semi-finals, Kale mouthed. Marcus's facade cracked. For just a moment, something that looked very much like fear crossed his features. Good, let him fear. Let him know what was coming. The anticipation was part of the punishment. That night, in his cramped dormitory room, Kale examined the doll. It had changed since their first meeting. The dark threads seemed more vibrant, the bone fragments more solid. The empty eye sockets now held tiny pinpricks of purple light. You're growing stronger, he observed. As are you, Vestris replied. Our bond deepens with each feeding. Your abilities expand. And tomorrow, you face the one who wronged you most, the culmination of your initial vengeance. He's not the only one. There's still his father, who orchestrated my parents' deaths. There's the curse that bound my bloodline. There are layers of enemies I haven't even discovered yet. Patience, child. One step at a time. Tomorrow you claim Marcus Thornwell, and in doing so, you announce to the world that Kale Ashford is no longer prey. Vestris's voice was warm with satisfaction. You become the predator. Kale nodded slowly. He thought about his parents, faceless now in his memory, but still a presence he carried. Would they approve of what he'd become? Would they understand the necessity? Maybe not, but they weren't here. They'd left him alone in this cruel world, and he'd had to find his own way to survive. If that way was paved with the suffering of his enemies, so be it. The semi-final match drew the largest crowd the Academy had seen in years. Word had spread far beyond the campus. Nobles from surrounding territories had arrived to witness the impossible. Scouts from major organizations occupied the VIP sections. Even the headmaster, who rarely attended student events, sat in his elevated box with an expression of keen interest. Cale Ashford versus Marcus Thornwell, the hollow grade failure against the golden prodigy, the charity case against old money, vengeance against privilege. The arena had been reconfigured for maximum visibility, a circular stage, elevated slightly with nothing to obstruct the view from any angle, no obstacles, no terrain advantages, just two combatants and the space between them. Marcus entered first, to thunderous applause. He wore combat attire worth more than most students earned in a year, enchanted fabrics that enhanced speed and durability, his prismatic grade mana core blazed visibly, a corona of multicolored energy surrounding him like a halo. Kale entered to silence. Not the contemptuous silence of before, but something more complex, uncertainty, anticipation. The audience didn't know how to react to him anymore. They faced each other across the stage. Marcus's earlier confidence had returned, bolstered by a night of preparation and the cheers of his supporters. "Let's end this farce," Marcus said. "I don't know how you've been cheating, but it stops here. My family hired specialists to analyze your matches. We know your tricks now." "Do you?" Kale asked mildly. Shadow manifestation, energy drain through touch, fear based psychological attacks. Marcus began circulating his mana, prismatic light swirling around him. "I've prepared counters for all of them. You can't shadow step through my barriers. You can't drain what you can't touch." And my mental fortitude was trained by the best tutors money could buy. Impressive preparations. "This is over, Ashford. You had a good run, but some differences can't be overcome. Talent wins, breeding wins. You were always going to end up on the ground." Kale thought about all the times Marcus had stood over him, all the casual cruelties, all the mornings he'd woken up dreading the day ahead because he knew Marcus would find some new way to humiliate him. "You're right about one thing," Kale said. "This is over." The officiating professor raised her hand. "On my signal, begin." Marcus launched forward with explosive speed, prismatic energy trailing behind him like a comet's tail. His fist drove toward Kale's face, enhanced beyond what any normal human could achieve. Kale didn't shadow step. He didn't dodge. He caught the punch. The impact created a shockwave that cracked the arena floor. Marcus's eyes went wide. His full power strike stopped cold by a single hand. "Your specialists analyze my tournament matches?" Kale said conversationally. "But they didn't analyze what I was doing every night for the past 3 weeks." He twisted Marcus's wrist. The golden prodigy was forced to his knees, his face contorting with pain. "They didn't know about the magical creatures I drained in the forest, the experimental spells I developed in secret, the limits I pushed when no one was watching." Curse binding, Kale thought, and dark symbols crawled across Marcus's skin. "They didn't know that I advanced to stage 3 last night." The curse took hold. Marcus screamed as his prismatic energy began to falter. The symbols acted as locks, sealing his power away piece by piece. "What are you doing to me?" Marcus gasped. "What the hell are you doing? What you did to me for years." Kale's voice was cold. "I'm making you feel helpless, powerless, worthless." He leaned close. "I'm showing you exactly what it's like to be treated as less than nothing." The audience was in chaos. Some were shouting for the match to be stopped. Others were transfixed, unable to look away. The professors in the officiating booth were conferring frantically, uncertain how to respond. "This isn't a normal, magical technique," someone in the crowd said loudly. "That's dark magic. That's forbidden." Perhaps it was. Kale didn't particularly care. He released Marcus, letting him collapse to the arena floor. The curse binding remained in place, suppressing his abilities. The golden prodigy was reduced to ordinary, powerless, and terrified. "Yield," Kale commanded. Marcus looked up at him. For the first time, Kale saw the person behind the privilege, a boy who had never faced genuine adversity, who had coasted on family wealth and natural talent without ever developing real strength of character, and who was now utterly, completely broken. "I yield," Marcus whispered. 67 units, total psychological, devastation, total. 274, 250th stage, 4 advancement, new abilities unlocking. Shadow Dominion, control existing shadows, in a wide radius soul glimpsey, read surface thoughts and memories curse mark, permanently brand targets with tracking signatures, partial manifestation, a low Vestris limited physical form. Winner, Kale Ashford. The professor's announcement was almost drowned out by the uproar. Advancing to the finals, Kale walked away from Marcus's broken form. Medical mages rushed to attend him, but the curse binding was beyond their ability to remove. Marcus would recover eventually, but he would never forget this moment. Never forget the terror of absolute helplessness, and neither would anyone watching. The tournament finals were postponed. An emergency meeting of the Academy board was called. Kale was summoned to the headmaster's office. He went without resistance. This was expected, even desirable. The headmaster's office occupied the highest floor of the central tower, accessed by a spiraling staircase enchanted to adjust its length based on the importance of the visitor. For most students, the climb took an hour. For Kale, it took 20 minutes. The enchantment didn't know how to categorize him. Headmaster Aldrich Vane was ancient, even by mage standards. His beard reached his waist, white and meticulously maintained. His eyes, however, were sharp as daggers, missing nothing. He had occupied this position for 70 years and had seen countless students come and go. But he had never seen anything like what Kale had become. Sit, Vane commanded. His voice carried the weight of decades of authority. Kale sat. What you demonstrated in that arena was not standard magic, Vane began. The curse binding you placed on young Thornwell. The energy-draining technique. The manifestation abilities. None of these match any school of magic we teach or acknowledge. No, Kale agreed. They don't. Where did you learn them? Kale considered lying. Considered spinning some tale about a discovered artifact or a spontaneous awakening, but Vestris whispered caution in his mind. This old mage was not easily deceived. I made a deal, Kale said simply, with something old, something that was once a god. Vane's expression didn't change, but Kale caught the slight tension in his shoulders, the quickening of his heartbeat. You consulted with a bound entity. That is one of the highest crimes in magical law. I survived, Kale replied. For years, everyone in this academy tried to crush me, tried to make me disappear, and no one ever faced consequences for it, so I found my own way to survive. The methods of survival matter, boy. What you've done will have repercussions beyond this academy. The Thornwell family will demand justice. Other noble houses will take note. The Magical Governance Council will investigate. Let them. Vane studied him for a long moment. You're not afraid. Interesting. The entity has bolstered your confidence significantly. Vestris has shown me my true potential, the potential that was locked away from me by a curse placed on my bloodline generations ago. Kale met Vane's gaze, a curse that someone in a position of authority must have known about. Something flickered in the headmaster's eyes. Recognition. Guilt. I wondered when you would discover that, Vane said quietly. The confession hit Kale like a physical blow. You knew. You knew all along that I could have been powerful, that my hollow grade classification was artificial. I knew there was a binding on your bloodline, yes, but I did not know how to remove it, and I did not know the full story behind its placement. And you said nothing? You watched me suffer for years. I was constrained. Vane's voice was heavy. There are powers in this world greater than a mere headmaster. Powers that made clear that your binding was not to be interfered with. I was told that it was necessary, that it was for the greater good. The greater good. Kale laughed bitterly. Of course, the eternal excuse for cruelty. You have every right to be angry, but before you pursue further vengeance, you should know the full truth. Vane reached into his desk and produced a sealed envelope, yellow with age. Your father left this. He gave it to me before his final battle, with instructions that it only be delivered if you ever awakened your power. Kale took the envelope with trembling hands. The seal bore his family crest, a symbol he'd rarely seen used. Your parents were not simple war mages, Vane continued. They were champions of an ancient order, sworn enemies of an entity called the Eternal Blight. Your bloodline was bound specifically to prevent that entity from using you as a vessel. Your parents knew the binding would make your life difficult, but they believed it was necessary to protect you from a worse fate. Kale opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in his father's hand, elegant script that he recognized from the few documents bearing his father's signature that he'd managed to find over the years. Along with the letter was a small locket containing portraits of his parents, painted in miniature with exquisite detail. His mother's warm eyes, his father's strong jaw, features that were echoed in his own face when he looked in the mirror. My son, he read aloud, his voice unsteady, if you are reading this, then you have somehow broken the binding we placed upon you. I am sorry. We never wanted you to feel lesser, to feel worthless, to feel abandoned. The decision to bind your power was the hardest choice your mother and I ever made, harder even than choosing to ride into battle against the blight. We knew it would make your life difficult. We knew it would mark you as hollow, as talentless, as everything you were never meant to be. But we also knew that the alternative was worse. The eternal blight sought to claim your bloodline as its own. It recognized the potential in our family line, potential that stretches back generations to the founding of the Order of the Veiled Sun. Without the binding, you would have been a beacon, drawing its attention, becoming its target, or worse, its vessel. If you have broken free, it means you have found another source of power. I pray it is benevolent, but I fear it may not be. The Blight has agents everywhere, entities that present themselves as allies while serving its endless hunger. Whatever path you walk now, remember who you are. Remember that we loved you. Remember that some sacrifices are made from love, not cruelty. Your mother and I gave our lives to protect this world and to protect you. We hope you will use whatever power you have found to protect others in turn. Not for revenge, though I would understand if that is your first impulse, for protection. For those who cannot defend themselves against the darkness. That is the true legacy of our family. That is what it means to be a champion of the Veiled Sun. We love you, son. We always will. Even in death, even in absence, even when you cursed our names for abandoning you. We love you. The letter continued, but Kale couldn't read through the sudden blur in his eyes. Tears fell, hot and unexpected, onto the ancient paper. All those years of believing he was unwanted, unloved, discarded. All those years of blaming his dead parents for leaving him alone. And the truth was so much more complicated, so much more tragic. Vestris was silent in his mind, conspicuously worryingly silent. The entity I've bonded with, Kael said slowly. What do you know about it? Vane shook his head. Nothing certain. But if your parents were sworn against the eternal blight, and you have now bonded with something that was once a god, then I would suggest extreme caution. Not all gods were enemies of the blight. Some were its servants, some were the blight itself, in other forms. Both partial manifestation, the system whispered, almost eagerly. Be quiet, Kale snapped, and Vestris recoiled as if struck. The headmaster watched this exchange with keen interest. It speaks to you, and you can command it. That is unexpected. Most who bond with such entities become subsumed, their personalities erased. I'm stronger than you think. Perhaps. Or perhaps you are merely more useful to the entity while retaining your individuality. Vane stood slowly, old joints creaking. The tournament finals will proceed tomorrow. I cannot cancel them without creating larger problems. But after they conclude, you and I will have a longer conversation about your parents, about the binding, about what you've become and what that means for the world. Kale nodded slowly, still processing everything he'd learned. His parents had bound him out of love. The suffering he'd endured had been a side effect, not a goal. And Vestris, what was Vestris really? One more thing, Vane said as Kale turned to leave. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide about your future, remember that power is a tool. It can be used for vengeance or for protection, for destruction or for healing. The entity may push you toward darkness, but the choice remains yours. Anyways, anything can be seen. I'll remember, Kale said. But as he walked back down the spiraling stairs, he wasn't sure what choice he would make. The anger was still there, banked but not extinguished. The years of suffering couldn't be erased by a letter and an apology. And Vestris, silent and waiting, was still bound to his soul. The tournament finals arrived with all the ceremony the Academy could muster. Kale's opponent was a fifth-year senior named Helena Bright, the current student champion and wielder of solar magic. Her power was immense, her technique flawless, her record undefeated. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Students filled every seat and crowded into every available space. Nobles and dignitaries had arrived from across the kingdom. The headmaster watched from his private box, eyes fixed on Kael. You don't have to do this, Vestris whispered, breaking his silence for the first time since the revelation. You've already proven yourself, already taken your vengeance. We can leave now, seek power elsewhere. And if I stay, Kale asked internally, what happens then? Then you face the champion, then you win or lose. Then the world knows your name. And what do you get from it? Silence. You've been feeding on despair this whole time, Kale pressed, growing stronger with every enemy I break. But it's not just their despair, is it? It's mine too. Every time I embrace the darkness, every time I choose vengeance over mercy, you grow stronger. We are partners, Vestris replied carefully. Our growth is mutual, but our goals are not. Kale pulled the doll from his pocket, examining it in the morning light. My father warned me about powers like you, powers that promise everything and take more than they give. Your father is dead. His warnings are the cautions of a man who never knew true power. Maybe, or maybe he understood it better than either of us. Kale stepped into the arena. Helena Bright awaited him at center stage, radiant in white combat attire that complemented her golden hair and sun-touched skin. She was everything the Academy valued: noble-born, naturally talented, conventionally impressive. She was also watching him with an expression that wasn't contempt. It was curiosity, respect. Kael Ashford, she said as he approached, the tournament's dark horse. I've watched all your matches, analyzed your abilities. I won't make the same mistakes as the others. Good, Kale replied. I don't want an easy victory. Helena smiled slightly. Neither do I. Whatever happens here, know that I recognize what you've done. Breaking out of the hollow grade classification, defeating opponents far above your theoretical level. That takes genuine strength, regardless of how it was achieved. It was the first genuine acknowledgement Kale had received from anyone at the Academy. The first time someone had spoken to him as an equal rather than a target or a threat. Thank you, he said, meaning it. Now let's see which of us is stronger. The match began. Helena didn't hold back. She unleashed the full force of her solar magic immediately, bathing the arena in brilliant light that eliminated every shadow. Kale couldn't shadow step, couldn't manifest shadow constructs. Half his abilities were negated from the start. Told you I'd learn from the others, Helena called, maintaining the blinding illumination while launching concentrated beams of solar energy. Each beam could melt steel. Kale dodged, his enhanced reflexes barely keeping him ahead of the attacks. He tried Fear Aura, but Helena's mental fortitude was everything it was rumored to be. She didn't even flinch. Your psychological techniques won't work on me, she confirmed. I trained with the best mind mages in the kingdom, and without your shadows, you're just a fast-moving target. What? She was right. Without shadows, he was at a severe disadvantage. Vestris, Kale thought. I need more power. Then advance our bond. Stage 5 awaits. But you must commit fully. No more hesitation. What would that mean? You would cease to be merely a wielder of darkness. You would become darkness itself. Your enemies would not face a mage with shadow magic. They would face shadow given form. Kale dodged another beam, barely escaping with singed clothing. Helena was pressing the attack, sensing his difficulty. And the cost? Your humanity, such as it remains, your attachments, your moral boundaries, all would become flexible. Kale thought about his father's letter, about protecting others instead of just destroying enemies, about using power for something more than vengeance. But he also thought about years of suffering, about Marcus's smug smile, about every foot that tripped him, every meal that was poisoned, every night he cried himself to sleep. There has to be another way, he insisted. Eleanor's beam caught him in the shoulder. Pain exploded through his body. He rolled, scrambled, trying to regain his footing. You're slowing down, Helena observed, running out of tricks. This is where natural talent proves itself. This is where breeding and training overcome shortcuts. She was wrong about shortcuts. Kale hadn't taken shortcuts. He'd been denied the straight path and forced to find another. But she was right that he was running out of options. Unless, Vestris, he thought carefully, what if I don't need more power from you? What if I need to use what I have more efficiently? Explain. You're bounded to that doll. You can manifest partially through me, but what if you manifested through something else? What if you enhanced something external instead of corrupting me further? A pause. That would be possible. Unconventional. but possible. My father mentioned an ancient order, champions who fought the eternal blight. They must have had techniques for wielding dark power without being consumed by it. They did. The Order of the Veiled Sun. They used artifacts to channel darkness rather than absorbing it directly. But such techniques require what? Sacrifice, not of life, but of power. You would have to give up a portion of what you've gained to create a stable external channel. Kale considered this as he continued dodging Helena's attacks. He'd gained so much power over these weeks. Draining it into an artifact would mean losing capabilities he'd only recently discovered, but it would also mean keeping his soul. Do it, he decided. Take what you need and give me a weapon I can use without losing myself. Vestris sighed. You are not what I expected, Kale Ashford. You are better. Perhaps there is hope for this partnership after all. Energy flowed out of Kale, draining into the doll he still carried. It hurt, like losing blood and breath at once, but something new took shape in his hands. A blade of crystallized darkness, self-contained and stable. Not shadows requiring external sources, but pure compressed dark energy in sword form. What is this? Kale asked, staring at the weapon that had appeared in his grip. A void blade, a weapon of the old order, created by sacrificing darkness to contain darkness. It requires no shadows. It fears no light. It is simply hungry. Kale smiled and charged at Helena. Her beams struck the blade and were absorbed, the light itself consumed by the weapon's endless appetite. Helena's eyes went wide. Impossible. Nothing absorbs solar magic directly. Most things aren't made of concentrated void. Kale closed the distance, moving with purpose now rather than desperation. Your light is impressive, Helena, but my darkness is deeper. They clashed properly for the first time. Solar light against void dark, brilliance against hunger, two opposing forces in perfect conflict. Helena's technique was flawless, her movements refined by years of training under the best instructors in the kingdom. Each swing of her light blade carved arcs of radiant energy through the air. Each step was calculated to maintain optimal positioning. She was the epitome of what the academy taught, the perfect student, the ideal mage. But Kale had been taught by desperation, by survival, by a god who remembered techniques from before human civilization built its first cities. His movements were unorthodox, unpredictable, driven by instinct honed in the crucible of constant threat. Where Helena followed patterns, Kale improvised. Where she maintained form, he exploited openings. The arena shook with their exchange. The magical barriers protecting the audience strained and cracked, hairline fractures spreading through crystalline shields that had stood for centuries. Mages in the stands poured their own power into reinforcing the protections, their faces pale with exertion. This was a fight beyond anything the tournament had seen in decades, perhaps ever. Solar beams clashed with void strikes, creating explosions of mixed energy that defied conventional magical theory. Helena's light tried to purify, to cleanse, to burn away the darkness. Kale's void tried to consume, to absorb, to incorporate. Neither gained permanent advantage. They fought across the arena floor, their conflict leaving scorched marks where light won and empty shadows where darkness prevailed. Helena's movements grew faster as she pushed herself beyond her normal limits. Kale responded by drawing deeper on his bond with Vestris, accessing reserves he hadn't known existed. You're stronger than I expected, Helene admitted between exchanges, genuine respect in her voice despite the combat. This isn't the power of a hollow-grade mage. This isn't even the power of something that can be classified. I stopped trying to fit into their classifications, Kale replied, parrying a sweep of concentrated sunlight with his void blade. I stopped letting them define what I was capable of. Then what are you? I'm someone who refused to stay broken, and for the first time Kale fought with joy instead of anger. The void blade felt right in his hands. Natural, like it had always been meant for him. Maybe it had. Maybe his parents' order had always intended for him to wield such weapons, to be a champion against darkness by mastering it rather than being mastered. You've changed, Helena observed between clashes. In the last minute, something's different. I made a choice, Kale replied. I chose to stop being a victim and start being a protector of myself, of others. Even of you. Protect me from what? Kale glanced toward the VIP section, where he could see, with his curse vision, dark threads connecting several noble observers to a greater pattern. A pattern that writhed with ancient malevolence. The eternal blight is already here, he realized. It's been manipulating the nobles, feeding on the conflict, growing stronger with every act of cruelty in this academy. You're certain? I can see it. The curse on my bloodline was meant to prevent this, to keep me from perceiving the Blight's influence. But now that I'm free, he refocused on Helena. We need to end this match. Quickly. There's something bigger happening. Helena studied him for a moment, then nodded. I believe you. I felt something wrong in the academy for months but couldn't identify it. She lowered her guard slightly. Shall we make this a draw? That would raise too many questions. Besides, Kale added with a grim smile, I genuinely don't know if I can beat you. Then let's find out. They resumed their battle, but the nature of it had changed. Less about proving superiority, more about pushing each other to their limits, testing what they could do. In the end, they brought each other to exhaustion simultaneously. Helena's solar reserves flickered and died at the same moment Kale's void blade destabilized. They stood facing each other, gasping, barely upright. Double elimination, the officiating professor announced, shock evident in her voice. For the first time in tournament history, we have joint champions. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, some protested, but Kale wasn't paying attention to them. He was watching the dark threads he could see throughout the arena, threads that were now recoiling, retreating. The eternal blight had noticed him noticing it, and it was not pleased. This isn't over, Kale muttered to Helena. The real fight is just beginning. Then we'll face it together, she replied. You and me. Light and dark. And possibly the entire academy once we explain what's happening. That should be an interesting conversation. Kale looked at the doll in his pocket, now transformed into something more cooperative, more symbiotic. At the void blade that had somehow returned to a dormant state, waiting to be summoned again. He thought about his parents, who had fought this battle before him, about the headmaster who had kept secrets but offered truth when it mattered, about Helena, an unexpected ally in what was shaping up to be a much larger war. Vestris, he thought, are you still with me? Always, child. We are bound, for better or worse. But I find I prefer this arrangement. Cooperation rather than corruption. It's refreshingly novel. Glad you approve. I didn't say I approved. I said it was novel. But perhaps your father's order had the right idea. Power doesn't have to consume, it can protect instead. Kale climbed down from the arena stage where the headmaster was waiting. The old mage's expression was complicated, a mixture of concern and something that might have been hope. Joint champions, Vane said. An unprecedented result. There are more unprecedented things coming, Kale replied. We need to talk, now, about the eternal blight, about why it's infiltrated your academy, and about how we're going to stop it. Vane's eyes widened slightly. You can see it? The corruption? I can see many things now, and what I see terrifies me. Kale looked back at the arena, at the nobles in their VIP boxes, at the students who had no idea what lurked among them. But I'm done being afraid. It's time to fight back. The headmaster nodded slowly. Then come, we have much to discuss. As Kale followed Vane toward the tower, Helena fell into step beside him. Her combat attire was torn and singed, her golden hair disheveled, but her eyes held a determination that matched his own. That was quite a fight, she said quietly. I don't think I've ever pushed myself that hard. Neither have I. Thank you for that. Thank me, she laughed softly. You nearly beat me. If you hadn't held back at the end, if you hadn't been distracted by whatever you were seeing, I saw the Blight's influence in the VIP section, among the nobles. Kale's voice was grim. It's been manipulating the academy for longer than anyone realized. Every act of cruelty, every hierarchy of power, it all feeds the darkness. Helena's expression hardened. Then we have a lot of work to do. Marcus Thornwell watched from the sidelines, still weak from his curse binding, but conscious now. His once perfect hair was matted with sweat, his expensive clothing wrinkled and stained. He looked diminished, reduced, a shadow of the golden prodigy who had ruled the academy's social scene for years. Their eyes met briefly. In that look, Kale saw not the arrogant bully who had tormented him for years. He saw a broken young man who might yet be saved if he chose to accept help rather than revenge. He saw someone who had been given everything and therefore never learned to appreciate anything, someone whose cruelty came from emptiness rather than malice. It didn't excuse what Marcus had done. Nothing could excuse years of systematic abuse. But understanding the source of someone's darkness was the first step toward deciding whether to destroy that darkness or illuminate it. The curse binding I placed on you, Kale called out, his voice carrying across the arena floor. It will fade in a few days. Your power will return, probably weaker at first, but recovering over time. What you do with your freedom is your choice. You can continue to be what you were, the golden bully, the privileged tormentor, or you can become something new, something better. Marcus said nothing. His jaw worked as if he wanted to speak, wanted to hurl defiance or apology or something, but no words came. I won't come after you again, Kale continued. I've had my vengeance. What happens next depends on the choices you make, not the fate I impose. It wasn't forgiveness. Kale wasn't capable of forgiveness yet, maybe never would be. But it was mercy, and that was something he'd thought the Academy had burned out of him entirely. Perhaps his parents' letter had reached deeper than he realized. Marcus's eyes glistened. Just for a moment, something human showed through the mask of privilege and pride. Then he turned away, supported by the medical mages, and was guided toward the recovery ward. That was surprisingly generous, Helena observed. It was necessary. The eternal blight feeds on cycles of hatred and revenge. If I kept feeding it through Marcus, I'd be no better than the darkness I'm fighting against. Kale watched his former tormentor disappear into the crowd. Besides, I need allies more than I need enemies right now, even former enemies. You think he could become an ally? I think everyone can change. I did, after all. 3 months ago, I was ready to die in that forest. Now I'm joint champion of the tournament and apprentice champion of an ancient order. Kale smiled slightly. Stranger things have happened. They reached the base of the tower where Headmaster Vane waited. The old mage studied them both with an expression that mixed concern with something that might have been hope. The eternal blight, Vane said without preamble. You claim you can see its influence. Show me. Kale activated Curse Vision and focused on the connections he'd perceived during the match. Dark threads, nearly invisible to normal magical sight, winding through the academy like roots through soil. There, he said, pointing toward a cluster of noble observers who were being guided out of the VIP section. Lord Harwich, Lady Venor, Baron Steele, they're all connected to something deeper, something that reaches down into the foundations of the academy itself. Vane's face went pale. Those are three of our most generous donors. They've been supporting the academy for decades and feeding the blight through it. Every scholarship denied, every talent suppressed, every hollow grade classification that shouldn't have been, it all served their master. You're saying the corruption goes that deep? I'm saying it goes deeper than any of us imagined. Kale met Vane's eyes. But that also means the solution has to go equally deep. We can't just cut off a few tentacles. We have to find the heart of it and destroy it utterly. That would require resources, knowledge, power beyond what any single mage possesses. Good thing I'm not a single mage anymore. Kale touched the doll in his pocket, feeling Vestras's presence hum with agreement. I'm a partnership, and I'm going to find others, champions of the Veiled Sun, like my parents were, people who can see the darkness and aren't afraid to fight it. Helena stepped forward. Count me in. If there's an ancient evil corrupting everything, I want to be part of stopping it. Vane looked between them, these two young mages who had just fought to a draw and were now pledging alliance against a threat older than the academy itself. Slowly, a smile cracked his ancient features. Your parents would be proud, he told Kale. Both of them. They always hoped you would find your way to this path, even if it took longer than they planned. They sacrificed everything to give me a chance, Kale replied. I'm not going to waste it. The Academy's secrets were about to be revealed. The Eternal Blight was about to face opposition, and Kale Ashford, once the ultimate failure, was about to become exactly what his parents had always hoped for, a champion of the Veiled Sun, a wielder of darkness in service of light, a hero reborn from the depths of despair. And that, as they say, was just the beginning of the story. because the real battle hadn't even started yet. The Blight had been growing in power for centuries, sinking its roots into every institution, every hierarchy, every system of control. Defeating it would require more than raw power. It would require strategy, alliances, sacrifices that Kale couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. He had Vestris, reformed from potential corrupter into genuine partner. He had Helena, whose light complemented his darkness. He had the headmaster's knowledge and the academy's resources once they finished cleaning out the corruption. Most importantly, he had purpose. Not just revenge, though, that fire still burned in him and probably always would, but something larger, something worth fighting for. His parents had protected the world at the cost of their lives. Now it was his turn to carry on their legacy, to honor their sacrifice by becoming the champion they'd always believed he could be. The shadows around him stirred, responsive to his will, eager for the battles to come. Let the eternal blight tremble in whatever dark dimension it called home. A new champion was rising, and this time the darkness would learn to fear the darkness. So if you enjoyed watching a bullied nobody rise up to challenge an ancient evil, if you want to see what happens when Kale confronts the eternal blight directly, and if you're ready for even more epic battles and shocking revelations, then smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible journey. And remember, sometimes the deepest darkness is where the brightest heroes are forged. See you in the next one.